In this video, we're going to talk about simplifying logarithmic expressions. So we're going to do that through an example. So let's say we have the base 6 log of the square root of 2x squared times the quantity x minus 5. Okay, and we want to simplify this. So what we're going to do is use the product rule for logs that we talked about in an earlier video, the quotient rule and the power rule. So we talked about all those in previous videos, and let's just summarize those real quick here. So in terms of the base 6 log, what that says is base 6 log of mn equals the base 6 log of m plus the base 6 log of n. Okay, that's the product rule. And then the quotient rule says the base, actually we're not going to need the quotient rule, so let me not write that down. But then the power rule, which we will need, says the base 6 log of m to the r equals r times the base 6 log of m. Okay, so for this particular example, we will need both the product rule and the power rule. So we won't need the quotient rule, but we will in a later example, so we'll talk about that then, or we'll review that then. But anyway, so let's go ahead and start with this example. So the first thing we want to do is look at what's inside the log. So we have a base 6 log of a square root of this whole mess here. Okay, so look at everything inside the log, and then we want to ask ourselves, what's the biggest thing that's happening here? Or is there anything that's happening to everything? So the biggest thing that's happening is the square root, because the square root is over everything. Okay, the square root is affecting everything in here. Okay, so that tells us that that's the first thing that we have to work with. So let's go ahead and do that. So this is equal to the base 6 log of, first what I want to do is rewrite the square root as a fractional exponent. So that's going to be 2x squared times the quantity x minus 5. And then all of that is inside of the square root. Remember, if you take a square root of something, that means you're raising that something to the 1/2 power. And since we were taking the square root of this entire mess right here, then we're going to raise the whole thing to the 1/2 power. Okay, so that's what's going on there. Now, and then this is all still inside of the base 6 log. Now these red brackets that I'm putting here, they're not really necessary, but they do kind of help with clarity, so that's never really a bad idea. Now what we can do is use this power rule here, okay, because now we have a power that's affecting everything, so we can pull the power out. Okay, and the reason that we can do that again is because this power is affecting everything. Now if we only had the 1/2 on maybe just this, or even this, then we couldn't do that. Okay, and actually here we do have a power on the x, we have an x squared, but because this squared power is only on the x, we can't pull out the power, because the power has to be on everything in order for us to pull it out. So anyway, continuing, this is now 1/2 times the base 6 log of 2x squared times the quantity x minus 5. Okay, and then again, that's all still inside of these red brackets here. All right, now notice what we have here is 2 times x squared times the quantity x minus 5. So we can actually use a sort of expanded form of the product rule here. And so here, if we have a product of 2 things, we can split it up into a sum of 2 things. But here we have a product of 3 things. Well, actually, we can split it up as a sum of 3 things. So the base 6 log of, let's say, m, n, and p is going to be the base 6 log of m plus the base 6 log of n plus the base 6 log of p. Okay, and you can just see that through a repeated application of using it for only 2 items. But anyway, let's scroll down a little bit. Okay, so if we continue with this, we're going to get 1/2 multiplied by the base 6 log of 2 plus the base 6 log of x squared plus the base 6 log of x minus 5. Okay, now a couple things to point out here. One, what I wrote down right here is actually not correct, because we have to be very careful. This 1/2 is being multiplied by this entire thing here. Okay, so what I actually want to do is put square brackets around this whole thing right here. Let me actually use a different color because they sort of signify different square brackets than what we've been denoting above. So here. Now these blue square brackets, these are necessary because again, this 1/2 is being multiplied by everything over here. Okay, not just the first thing; it's being multiplied by everything. So we have to be very careful about that. And also these these parentheses right here around the x minus 5, those are necessary because the entire x minus 5 is inside of this log base 6 here. Okay, so we have to be careful about that. But these parentheses around the x squared, not really necessary. Doesn't hurt to have them, but again, they're not really necessary. Okay, so scroll down a little bit and continuing. Let's see. So there's a couple more things we can do to simplify. We can actually use the power rule again. Now that we have the x squared by itself right here, we can use the power rule on that guy, and then we're going to get 1/2 times square bracket base 2 log, or sorry, base 6 log of 2 plus 2 times the base 6 log of x plus the base 6 log of x minus 5. Okay. Now I do want to point out that there's nothing more we can do to simplify the base 6 log of x minus 5. We cannot split this up at all. Okay, so you might be tempted to maybe use something like the quotient rule and split it up as a difference of logs, but you can't do that because there's no quotient here. Okay, what we have is a difference inside of the log, not a quotient, so we can't do anything to split it up. And I guess there is one more small thing we could do overall, and that's distribute the 1/2 so that we have 1/2 times the base 6 log of 2 plus, and then what we have here is 1/2 times 2, so those actually cancel, and we just end up with base 6 log of x, which is kind of nice. And then we have plus 1/2 times the base 6 log of x minus 5. Okay, and that would be our final answer there. So this might seem like a long and tedious process, but if you practice with these, do a few, get some practice in, and you'll probably start to get really comfortable with these, and you can almost do these in just one step just by looking at it. Okay. So here, base 6 log of square root of 2x squared, x minus 5. The biggest thing happening was the square root, so we took care of that first. Pulled that out using the power rule. Then we split up what was left here using the product rule for logs. And then we used the power rule again on this part right here. And then we distributed the 1/2 to simplify, and that gave us our final answer here. Okay, so that's an example of simplifying a logarithmic expression.